Victoria Henderson, once a billionaire worth $12 billion, lost everything in a single afternoon: her company, her fortune, even her home. Now she sat on the steps of the building that once bore her name, soaked by the rain, preparing for her first night of homelessness. Suddenly, a homeless black man and his young son stopped in front of her. The man held out his hand and said, "Come with me. I know a safe place." Victoria froze. That night she would discover that the man was hiding a past that would change her life forever. Before we go back to the story, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next is even more surprising. Victoria Henderson had spent 37 years building an empire. Tonight she watched it collapse in 6 hours. The boardroom of Henderson Global Enterprises had emptied quickly after the vote, 12-3. Her own board of directors had sided with the hostile takeover. The company she'd founded from nothing, that bore her name, that had made her $12 billion, gone. Sold to her biggest competitor while she sat powerless in her $1,000 suit, watching everything she'd defined herself by vanish like smoke. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Bank accounts frozen, assets seized, credit cards declined, the penthouse apartment, repossession notice by morning. Her attorney's text was blunt: "They moved faster than we anticipated. Everything's locked down. I'm sorry." Victoria stood alone in the empty parking garage, rain hammering the concrete around her. Her car had been towed, company vehicle no longer hers. Her driver had stopped answering calls. Security hadn't recognized her on the way out, or pretended not to. She had $47 in her wallet. That was it. The rain soaked through her designer suit as she walked, no destination in mind. Her husband had left 2 years ago, taking half her wealth and all their friends. Her parents were dead. She'd spent decades building a company instead of relationships, and now she had neither. She found herself on the steps of her former building, sitting in the downpour because she had nowhere else to go. The irony was bitter: a woman who'd once been worth billions, sitting on the street with nothing. A gentle voice broke through her thoughts. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Victoria looked up to see a middle-aged black man, probably in his early 40s, standing under a piece of cardboard he was using as an umbrella. His clothes were worn but clean, and his dark eyes held a kindness she hadn't seen in years. Beside him stood a young boy, maybe 9 years old, with the same warm eyes and a concerned expression. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice barely audible over the rain. "No, you're not," the man said simply, kneeling down beside her despite the puddles. "Nobody sits in the rain like this when they're fine. I'm Marcus. This is my son Deshaun. What's your name?" "Victoria," she whispered. "Well, Victoria, this isn't a place to spend the night. Trust me, I know." He extended his hand to her. "Come on." She stared at his hand for a moment, her mind racing. This man who clearly had nothing was offering to help her. Part of her wanted to refuse. She didn't need charity from homeless people. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had built a billion-dollar company, recognized that pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Neither do we, officially, but I know a place that's warm and dry. Come on." Something in his voice, not pity, but genuine concern, made her take his hand. The young boy, Deshaun, looked uncertain but stayed close to his father as they walked. As they made their way through the empty streets, Marcus didn't pry. He talked about the weather, pointed out which storefronts stayed lit all night, mentioned which alleys to avoid. The boy stayed quiet, occasionally glancing at Victoria with curiosity but not speaking. He led them 6 blocks to an abandoned warehouse, slipping through a gap in the fence that he'd clearly used many times before. "Home sweet home," he said, his voice carrying an edge of irony, as he led them through a door that looked locked but opened easily. Inside, Marcus had created a surprisingly organized living space in one corner. Blankets hung from the ceiling for privacy. Candles provided soft light. He'd even managed to arrange some furniture he'd found: a worn couch, a small table, crates serving as chairs. "This is incredible," Victoria said, and meant it. In the corporate world, she'd praised elaborate offices and expensive conference rooms. But this was resourcefulness she'd never possessed. "About 8 months," Marcus said, lighting a few more candles. "I know it doesn't look like much, but it's safe and dry. Better than a lot of places we've stayed. Right, Deshawn? The boy nodded but didn't speak, still watching Victoria warily. Marcus handed Victoria a towel and a change of clothes, men's clothing, but clean and dry. These might be big on you, but they'll keep you warm. There's a corner over there where you can change. I can't take your clothes, Victoria protested, her corporate instincts kicking in. Everything was a transaction. What would he want in return? You can and you will, Marcus said firmly, as if reading her suspicion. When someone offers you help, you take it with gratitude. That's rule number 1 of surviving out here. I'm not asking for anything back. Right, son? Right, Dad, Deshawn said quietly, already preparing their small camping stove. Victoria changed into the oversized jeans and hoodie, both worn but clean. When she emerged, Marcus and Deshawn had prepared a simple meal, canned soup heated over the camping stove, divided carefully into 3 portions. She noticed Marcus had given her slightly more than he and Deshawn took for themselves. How do you do this? She asked, sitting across from them on the makeshift couch. How do you stay so organized when you have so little? Marcus smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Who says we have little? We have our health, our minds, our freedom. We have each other. We have this place to sleep safely. We had enough food to share with someone who needed it. My dad says we're rich in what matters, Deshawn added, his voice so quiet Victoria barely heard him. The boy was clearly uncomfortable with a stranger in their space. Victoria ate the soup slowly. It was better than any meal she'd had in weeks, not because of the taste, but because it was offered without judgment. I lost everything today, she found herself saying, my company, my money, my home. Everything. That sounds terrible, Marcus said, his tone careful, not pitying. What kind of company? Technology. Software development mostly. We created platforms for small businesses to manage their operations. She paused. We helped people. At least I thought we did. Helping people is never a waste, Marcus said. Maybe you lost one way of helping, but that doesn't mean you can't find another. Easy to say when you're not the one who just lost $12 billion. The words came out sharper than she intended, defensive. Marcus didn't flinch. You're right, I've never lost $12 billion. I've never had $12 billion, but I've lost everything that mattered to me too. My wife died when Deshawn was 2 years old. Cancer, medical bills took everything we had, our house, our savings, everything. I was working 3 jobs trying to keep up, but it wasn't enough. Then I got injured on one of those jobs, construction accident that messed up my back. Couldn't work for 6 months. By the time I recovered, we'd lost everything. I'm sorry, Victoria said, meaning it this time. Deshawn was only 2 when his mama passed, Marcus continued, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. Too young to really remember her, but I tell him stories every night so he knows what an amazing person she was. My mom helped people, Deshawn said suddenly, looking directly at Victoria for the first time. Dad says when you help people, that's what matters, not how much money you have. The simple wisdom from a 9-year-old child struck Victoria harder than any business lesson she'd ever learned. What would you do? Victoria asked Marcus. If you had the chance to start over, really start over, what would you build? Marcus looked at her carefully, as if trying to determine whether she was asking seriously or just making conversation. Finally, he seemed to decide she meant it. You really want to know? For the next 2 hours, as the storm raged outside, Marcus talked about his ideas. Before his injury, he'd been working construction, but he'd seen so many problems with how affordable housing was built. He had ideas about using salvaged materials in smart ways, about creating community spaces that brought people together instead of isolating them. He spoke about mobile workshops that could teach practical skills to people who needed jobs, about mentorship programs that paired experienced tradespeople with young people looking for direction. Victoria listened, and as she did, something awakened in her that had been dormant for years. Marcus's ideas weren't just dreams. They were practical, grounded in real experience, and addressed genuine needs. His thinking was clear and logical, solving complex problems with elegant simplicity. These are brilliant ideas, Victoria said finally. All of them. They're just dreams, Marcus replied, his voice carrying a hint of bitterness. takes money to make things happen, and money is something we definitely don't have. But what if you did? Victoria asked. Then she caught herself. What was she doing? She had $47 to her name. She couldn't help this man any more than he could help himself. Marcus studied her face in the candlelight. Are you offering something, Victoria? Because if you are, I want to be clear. I'm not looking for charity. I've had people promise help before, and it always comes with strings. Always comes with them, thinking they know better than me, because I'm homeless and they're not. The wariness in his voice made Victoria realize something important. Marcus had been burned before. He had good reason not to trust her. I don't know what I'm offering, Victoria admitted. I might be completely broke right now, but I know how to build companies. I know how to find investors and navigate regulations. What I don't have anymore is ideas that matter, ideas that could actually change lives. And I have the ideas and the practical skills, but not the connections or the business knowledge, Marcus said thoughtfully. And more importantly, I don't have any reason to trust that you won't just use my ideas and then disappear when things get hard. You're right, Victoria said. You have no reason to trust me. I'm a stranger you met in the rain. For all you know, I'm unstable or incompetent. My own board of directors just voted me out of my own company. Why'd they do that? Marcus asked directly. Victoria appreciated the bluntness. Because I made bad decisions. I trusted the wrong people, ignored warning signs, prioritized growth over sustainability. I built something big but fragile, and when one competitor came after us aggressively, it all fell apart. So why should I trust you with my dreams? Marcus asked. Maybe you shouldn't, Victoria said. But maybe we could help each other figure out if there's something worth building together. No commitments, no promises, just exploration. Marcus looked at Deshawn, who'd been listening quietly. The boy shrugged, a very 9-year-old response. Okay, Marcus said finally. Partners. But equal partners. Not you doing me a favor, not you teaching the poor homeless guy about business. Equal partners with equal say. I can agree to that, Victoria said, though part of her bristled at the idea of being equal with someone who was homeless. She pushed that thought down, recognizing it for what it was, the elitism that had helped destroy her company. Marcus extended his hand. Partners. Victoria shook it, feeling the calluses from years of construction work. Partners. As they settled in for the night, Victoria realized she had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. It wasn't quite hope, but it wasn't hopelessness either. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight in an abandoned warehouse with a man and his son, who had every reason to turn her away but hadn't, Victoria Henderson began to understand that losing everything might be the beginning of something rather than the end. Victoria woke up to sunlight, streaming through the dirty windows of the warehouse, her body aching from sleeping on the hard floor. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was in her penthouse, and this had all been a nightmare. Then she saw Marcus moving quietly around their makeshift camp, organizing supplies, while Deshawn practiced writing in a worn notebook at the small table, and reality crashed back over her. She was homeless. She had nothing. Yesterday's conversation about partnership had probably been delusional thinking. Morning, Marcus said, noticing she was awake. His voice was neutral, not particularly warm or cold. Sleep okay? Not really, Victoria admitted. Her back hurt, her neck was stiff, and she felt grimy in a way she'd never experienced before. It takes time to adjust, Marcus said, handing her a cup of something that smelled vaguely like coffee. Your body has to learn to sleep differently. Victoria sipped the coffee. It was weak and bitter, but it was warm. How did you manage real coffee? Friend who works at the coffee shop down the street, saves me the leftover grounds, Marcus explained. I brew it strong to make it last longer. Deshawn and I pick it up 3 mornings a week. In exchange for what? Victoria asked, her business mind automatically looking for the transaction. In exchange for me fixing their broken refrigerator 2 months ago, Marcus said. And for me being reliable and respectful. Not everything is a transaction, Victoria. Sometimes it's just people helping each other. The gentle rebuke stung because it was accurate. Deshawn looked up from his notebook. Are you going to stay here? He asked bluntly. Deshawn, Marcus said warningly. It's okay, Victoria said. It's a fair question. I don't know, I don't have anywhere else to go right now. Dad helps a lot of people, Deshaun said, his voice still guarded. But most of them don't stay long, they take his help, and then they leave and we don't see them again. Son, that's enough, Marcus said firmly, but Victoria understood. Deshaun was protecting his father from being used again. The boy had seen it happen before. I can't promise I'll stay, Victoria said honestly. I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, but I can promise that if I leave, it won't be because I used your father and disappeared. Deshaun studied her with eyes far too old for 9 years, then went back to his notebook without responding. About last night, Marcus said, settling down with his own cup of coffee. The partnership idea, were you serious, or was that just desperation talking? I don't know, Victoria admitted. Maybe both. I know I have business skills that could be useful. I know you have ideas worth developing. But I also know, I have $47 to my name, no phone service, no computer access, and no credibility anymore, so maybe it was delusional. Maybe, Marcus agreed. Or maybe it's the first honest assessment of your situation you've made. You're thinking about what you can actually offer rather than what you used to be able to offer. That's not particularly encouraging. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be realistic. Marcus pulled out his notebook, the one with his sketches and ideas. If we're going to try this, really try it, we need to be honest about what we're working with. I have ideas, skills, community connections, and time. You have business knowledge, experience with investors, and probably some contacts who might still take your call. Neither of us has money or credibility right now, so where do we start? Victoria asked. We start by you learning to survive out here, Marcus said. Because if you can't handle the basics of being homeless, we're not building anything together. You'll leave within a week. Victoria bristled at the implication that she couldn't handle hardship. I built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I think I can handle. You built a company with venture capital funding, office space, employees and infrastructure. Marcus interrupted. That's not the same as surviving on the street with no resources. If you can't admit that, we're done before we start. The words were harsh, but not unkind. Victoria forced herself to swallow her pride. You're right, I don't know how to do this. Will you teach me? That's better, Marcus said. Today is Street Life 101. Deshaun, you coming with us, or staying here to study? Coming, the boy said immediately, closing his notebook. Clearly he wanted to watch how Victoria handled herself. Their first stop was the public library. Victoria expected they'd go straight to computers to work on business plans. Instead, Marcus led them to the children's section where he and Deshaun began efficiently organizing returned books on the shelves. What are you doing? Victoria asked. Earning our computer time, Marcus explained. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, lets us use computers for 2 hours each morning in exchange for helping organize books and assisting elderly patrons with technology. But we need to work on our business plan, Victoria protested. And we will, after we've earned the right to use the computers. That's how it works here. You want something, you offer something in return. Victoria felt frustrated, but forced herself to help. She was clumsy at first, putting books in wrong sections, not understanding the organizational system. Deshaun corrected her twice, his voice patient but clearly finding her incompetence amusing. After 30 minutes of shelving, Mrs. Patterson called Victoria over. Dear, could you help Mrs. Jones? She's trying to video call her grandson but keeps accidentally closing the window. Victoria looked at the elderly woman struggling with a tablet and felt completely out of her depth. She'd spent years managing software developers but hadn't personally helped a non-technical person with basic technology in decades. I try, Victoria said. Mrs. Jones was frustrated and embarrassed. Victoria had to work hard to be patient, to explain things clearly without using technical jargon, to move at the older woman's pace. It took 20 minutes to set up the video call, time that felt endless, but when Mrs. Jones's grandson's face appeared on screen, and the elderly woman's face lit up with joy, Victoria felt something unexpected. Satisfaction. Real satisfaction, from helping one person with one small thing. You're good at that, Marcus said when she returned. Better than I expected. I used to be terrible at it, Victoria admitted. I'd get impatient with people who didn't understand technology quickly. I'm not sure I'm any better now, I just don't have the luxury of being impatient anymore. That's growth, Marcus said simply. Finally they sat down at computers. Victoria expected to dive into business planning, but Marcus had other ideas. First we research, he said. I need you to find data on housing insecurity in our city. Current numbers, demographics, existing programs. I need to understand what's already being done before we figure out what we can do differently. Victoria dove into the research, and her business training kicked in. She knew how to find data, how to analyze it, how to identify gaps. After an hour, she had a comprehensive picture of the local housing crisis and existing intervention programs. The existing programs are all top-down, she observed. Government agencies and large non-profits providing services to people. Nobody's doing participatory models where the people experiencing housing insecurity are part of the solution. Exactly, Marcus said. That's why my idea is different. But we need to prove there's demand for this approach. How do we do that? We ask people, Marcus said, as if it were obvious. That afternoon, Marcus took Victoria to a community center where he volunteered. She watched as he talked with people, really talked with them, not at them, about their experiences with housing programs. He had a gift for making people feel heard without judgment. Victoria tried to join the conversations, but found herself falling back into corporate patterns, asking leading questions, making assumptions, trying to direct the conversation toward predetermined conclusions. Stop that, Marcus said quietly, when they took a break. You're not conducting market research for a product. You're listening to human beings talk about their lives. What's the difference? The difference is whether you see them as data points or as people. Right now, you're seeing data points. The criticism stung, but Victoria knew he was right. She was treating these conversations, the way she treated focus groups, as information to extract rather than relationships to build. How do I change that? She asked. Stop trying to get something from them, Marcus said. Just listen. Actually care about their answers. These aren't potential customers or program participants, they're people whose experiences matter regardless of whether they help our business plan. Victoria tried again, this time focusing on truly listening rather than analyzing. She talked with James Robinson, an older man who'd been taking care of his disabled brother for 5 years while trying to find stable housing. Instead of thinking about how his situation fit into their program model, she just heard his story, the sacrifices, the frustrations, the small victories. You're doing important work, Victoria told him when he finished talking. Taking care of your brother like that takes incredible skill and dedication. James looked surprised, then emotional. Most people don't see it that way, they just see me as unemployed. Then most people are wrong, Victoria said, and meant it. After they left the community center, Deshawn spoke up for the first time all afternoon. You're better when you're not trying so hard. It was perhaps the most honest feedback Victoria had received in years. That evening, Marcus taught Victoria about finding food. He had relationships with 3 restaurants that saved leftover meals instead of throwing them away. At each stop, Victoria watched Marcus interact with the owners and staff, warm, respectful, grateful. At Giovanni's Italian kitchen, the owner greeted Marcus like an old friend. Hey Marcus, got your usual box ready. Who's your friend? This is Victoria, she's helping me with a project. Nice to meet you, Giovanni said, handing over a box of perfectly good pasta and bread. Any friend of Marcus is welcome here. This guy helped me fix my walk-in freezer last month, saved me thousands in repair costs. As they left with enough food for 2 days, Victoria shook her head in wonder. You've built an entire support network through genuine relationships. That's how you survive out here, Marcus said. You can't afford to see people as transactions or resources. You have to see them as human beings and build real connections. Their final lesson of the day was about safety. Marcus showed her which areas of the city were safe during the day, but dangerous at night. He taught her to always have multiple exit routes from any location. He explained the subtle signs that indicated whether someone approaching was genuinely helpful or potentially dangerous. See that alley, he pointed out as they walked, looks clean and quiet. right. But notice there's only one exit. Something bad happens, you're trapped. Always choose spaces with multiple ways out. I never would have thought of that, Victoria admitted. Most people don't have to, Marcus said, but when you're vulnerable, these details matter. Deshaun, what's the rule? Always know where you can run to, the boy recited. Never go somewhere you can't get out of fast. A 9-year-old boy, having to memorize safety rules like that broke something in Victoria's chest. As they returned to the warehouse that evening, Victoria felt exhausted in a way she'd never experienced before. Not the mental fatigue of business deals and board meetings, but the physical and emotional exhaustion of constant vigilance and adaptation. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said as Marcus prepared their dinner. "Sure. Why are you helping me? Really? You don't know me. I could be using you. I could take your ideas and disappear once I get back on my feet." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, stirring the pot of soup. Finally he spoke. "When Angela was dying, when I was working 3 jobs, and still couldn't keep up with the medical bills, you know what I learned? I learned that the world divides into 2 kinds of people. People who kick you when you're down, because it makes them feel superior, and people who help you up because they remember what it felt like to be down. I decided I wanted to be the second kind, but how do you know I won't betray that?" "I don't," Marcus said simply, "but I'd rather risk being used than become someone who stops helping people because I'm afraid of being hurt. That's a bigger loss than any betrayal could be." Victoria felt tears in her eyes, the first tears she'd shed since losing her company. "I don't deserve your trust." Maybe not, but trust isn't about deserving it, it's about choosing to give it anyway. That night, as Victoria lay on the hard floor trying to sleep, she thought about everything she'd learned. She'd spent the day feeling incompetent, humbled, and challenged in ways her corporate life never had. She'd failed at simple tasks that Marcus and Deshaun navigated effortlessly, but she'd also felt more alive, more engaged, more purposeful than she had in years. Tomorrow would bring more lessons, more challenges, but tonight, she was beginning to understand that losing everything she thought mattered might be teaching her what actually did. By the end of Victoria's first week living in the warehouse, she'd learned more about survival and human nature than 4 years of business school had taught her. But she'd also learned something uncomfortable about herself. She was terrible at not being in charge. "You're doing it again," Marcus said on their 8th morning together. They were at the library, supposedly working on their business plan, but Victoria kept trying to direct the conversation toward her vision of how things should work. "Doing what?" Victoria asked defensively. "Trying to control everything. Every time I suggest something, you immediately start explaining why your way would be better or more efficient." "I'm not trying to control, I'm trying to contribute my expertise." "No, you're trying to be the boss," Deshaun said quietly from where he was doing schoolwork. "Even though you and Dad are supposed to be partners." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. The 9-year-old was right. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "You're both right. I'm not good at being equal with someone. I'm used to either leading or following, not partnering." "Why?" Marcus asked directly. Victoria thought about this carefully. "Because in business, clarity of authority prevents conflicts. Someone has to make final decisions. If we're always negotiating everything as equals, we'll never get anything done." "That works in corporations," Marcus said. "But this isn't a corporation. This is 2 people with different skills trying to build something together. If you don't trust my judgment as much as I'm supposed to trust yours, this won't work." "I do trust your judgment about construction and community needs," Victoria said. "But business strategy, fundraising, organizational structure, that's where I have expertise you don't, and I respect that," Marcus said. "But you don't seem to respect that I have expertise in areas you don't. You act like my knowledge is less valuable because it comes from lived experience instead of business school." The accusation stung because it was accurate. Victoria had been unconsciously dismissing Marcus's insights while expecting him to defer to hers. "You're right," she admitted. "I've been acting like my expertise is superior when it's just different. I need to work on that." "Yes you do," Marcus said bluntly. "Because right now,
I'm spending half my energy building our project and half my energy managing your need to be in charge. That's not sustainable. Over the next few days, Victoria made a conscious effort to listen more and direct less. It was harder than she expected. Every time Marcus suggested an approach she thought was inefficient, she had to bite her tongue and ask questions instead of issuing corrections.
But something interesting happened. When she actually listened to Marcus's reasoning, she often found he'd thought through problems she'd missed. His approaches were different from hers, but not wrong. Sometimes they were actually better. "You're getting better at this," Marcus observed after they'd successfully collaborated on a project timeline. "You're asking instead of telling now." "It's exhausting," Victoria admitted. "My instinct is still to just make decisions and move forward." "That instinct is probably why your board voted you out," Marcus said, and though the words were harsh, his tone wasn't unkind. "If you never listened to other perspectives, you probably missed a lot of warning signs." He was right. Victoria had surrounded herself with people who either agreed with her or kept quiet when they disagreed. She'd created a culture where her word was law, which meant she never got honest feedback until it was too late. "I don't want to make that mistake again," she said. "Then keep practicing partnership instead of leadership," Marcus said. "It's a different skill." Their second week together brought a new challenge. They needed to start actually doing something, not just planning. Marcus suggested they identify one family who needed housing and help them build a single home as a proof of concept. "We don't have money for materials," Victoria pointed out. "We don't need much," Marcus said. "I've been salvaging materials from construction sites for months. I have enough stored in various locations to build one small structure. What we need is someone to help." They put the word out through Marcus's community network and within 2 days had 3 families expressing interest. Marcus insisted they interview all 3 before choosing who to work with. "This isn't about who needs it most," Marcus explained. "It's about who's ready to be a full partner in building their own home. We're not doing charity, we're doing collaboration." The first family they interviewed was a single mother named Angela Porter with 2 young children. She was living in her car and desperate for housing. But when Marcus explained that she'd need to commit 16 hours a week to learning construction and building her own home, she hesitated. "I work 2 jobs, Angela explained. "I don't know if I can commit that much time." "Then this program might not be right for you right now," Marcus said gently. "And that's okay, there are other resources that might be better fits." Victoria was surprised that Marcus would turn away someone who clearly needed help. After Angela left, she asked about it. "She wasn't ready," Marcus explained. "Not because she's not capable or deserving, but because she doesn't have the bandwidth right now. If we'd pushed forward anyway, she would have struggled, probably dropped out, and then felt like she failed. That doesn't help anyone. So we only help people who are already in a good position to help themselves. We help people who are ready to be partners in their own transformation," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference between needing help and being ready to fully participate in getting that help." The second family was an elderly couple, James and Dorothy Lawson. They'd lost their home to a predatory lender and had been living in a shelter for 6 months. When Marcus explained the program, their faces lit up. "You mean we'd actually build our own house?" Dorothy asked. "We'd be part of the construction, not just part of it," Marcus said. "You'd be leading it. I'd teach you the skills and provide guidance, but it would be your project, your decisions, your home." "I used to do carpentry," James said. "Before my arthritis got bad, I always dreamed of designing a home, never thought I'd get the chance at 67 years old. I've always loved architecture," Dorothy added. "I check out books from the library, sketch designs, but we never had the money to build anything custom." Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of partnership they'd envisioned. "When can we start?" James asked. They met with the third family as planned, a young veteran named Thomas Bennett who'd been homeless since returning from deployment, but Marcus and Victoria had already decided the Lawsons were their first project. However, after they met Thomas, they revised that decision. Thomas was quiet, guarded, but when he talked about his experience, something in his voice resonated with both Marcus and Victoria. He'd served his country, come home to nothing, and spent 3 years being invisible on the streets. He wasn't looking for a handout. He was looking for a chance to rebuild his life with dignity. "We're going to do both families," Victoria decided. "The Lawsons and Thomas, 2 houses built simultaneously." "We don't have materials for 2 houses," Marcus pointed out. Then we find more materials. We can't turn away either of these families. They're both perfect for what we're trying to build. Marcus looked at her carefully. That's your take charge instinct talking again. You're making unilateral decisions instead of discussing with your partner. Victoria caught herself. You're right, I'm sorry. What do you think about trying to help both families? I think it's ambitious and possibly reckless, Marcus said. But I also think you're right that we can't turn either of them away. If we're going to try for 2 houses though, we need a better plan for materials and labor. What if we recruited volunteers? Victoria suggested. People who want to learn construction skills while helping families build homes. That could work, Marcus said thoughtfully. There are people in the community who've expressed interest in learning trades. If we framed this as a training opportunity, not charity, we might get volunteers who'll really commit. Over the next week they put together a plan. They'd build 2 small houses, one for the Lawsons, one for Thomas, using salvaged materials and volunteer labor. Marcus would teach construction skills to anyone who wanted to learn. The families would be full partners in the design and building process. They recruited 8 volunteers from the community center, people who were underemployed or looking to learn new skills. Marcus created a training schedule that would teach basic carpentry, electrical work and plumbing while actually building the houses. But when they went to file for building permits, they hit their first major obstacle. You need to be a registered non-profit organization to get permits for this type of project, the city clerk explained. You also need liability insurance, licensed contractors to supervise the work, and proof of property ownership or a legal lease for the building site. Victoria felt her old corporate instincts kicking in. This was the kind of bureaucratic challenge she'd spent years navigating. We can register as a non-profit, that takes time but it's doable. The insurance will be expensive but necessary. But the property issue, that's a problem. We don't own any land. I might know someone, Marcus said carefully, but I don't know if he'll help us. The someone turned out to be Pastor William Green, who ran a small church that owned several vacant lots in the neighborhood. Marcus explained their project and Pastor Green listened carefully. You want to build houses on my church's property, he summarized, using salvaged materials and volunteer labor for homeless families who will then own these homes. Yes, Marcus said. I know it sounds risky, it sounds like exactly what this community needs, Pastor Green interrupted. But I have questions. How do you ensure quality? How do you handle liability if someone gets hurt? What happens if the families can't maintain the homes? Victoria and Marcus spent 2 hours answering questions, revising their plan in real time as Pastor Green raised valid concerns they hadn't considered. By the end they had a more robust plan and Pastor Green's support. I'll lease you the land for $1 per year, Pastor Green said. The church will be listed as the property owner, which helps with permits. The families can live in the homes rent-free for the first 5 years. After that we'll work out a pathway to ownership. Does that work? It was more than they'd hoped for. Victoria felt a surge of excitement. This was actually happening. But Marcus looked worried. What's wrong? Victoria asked after they left the church. Pastor Green is taking a huge risk, Marcus said. If something goes wrong, if someone gets hurt, if the houses aren't safe, if we fail, it could damage his church's reputation and mission. He's trusting us with a lot. We won't let him down, Victoria said confidently. You don't know that, Marcus said sharply. You can't know that. Things go wrong in construction. People get hurt, plans fail. You're making promises we might not be able to keep. So what should we have done? Turn down his help? No, Marcus said. But we should be honest about the risks instead of acting like success is guaranteed. That's what partnership means, being honest about what we don't know, not just confident about what we think we know. The rebuke stung, but Victoria recognized the pattern Marcus was pointing out. She was slipping back into her corporate habit of projecting confidence even when she felt uncertain, of making assurances to get buy-in rather than being honest about limitations. You're right, she admitted. I need to work on that. But Marcus, I also need you to understand something. In business, confidence matters. If we go into this project acting scared and uncertain, people won't trust us. Sometimes you have to project confidence even when you're worried. There's a difference between projecting confidence and making false promises, Marcus said. You can be honest about challenges while still being confident you'll find solutions. They were learning each other's styles, and the friction was real. Victoria's corporate approach valued strategic optimism and confident messaging. Marcus's community-based approach valued transparent communication and honest vulnerability. Neither was wrong, but they hadn't figured out how to blend them yet. That evening back at the warehouse, Deshawn asked a question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Dad, do you trust Miss Victoria?" Marcus looked at his son, then at Victoria, considering the question carefully. "I'm learning to," he said finally. "Trust isn't something you have or don't have, it's something you build over time. Victoria and I are building it, but what if she messes up?" Deshawn asked. "What if she makes mistakes that hurt us?" "She will make mistakes," Marcus said. "I will too, that's not a question. The question is whether we can be honest about mistakes and learn from them, or whether we hide them and make them worse." Victoria felt the weight of that statement. Deshawn wasn't just asking about their business partnership, he was asking whether Victoria could be trusted with his father's dreams and by extension their lives. "I will make mistakes," Victoria said directly to Deshawn. "I already have, but I promise I'll be honest about them, and I'll try to learn from them. That's the best I can offer." Deshawn studied her with those two old eyes, then nodded slowly. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a start. As Victoria lay down to sleep that night, she thought about trust. In her corporate life, trust had been transactional. You trusted people as long as their incentives aligned with yours. But Marcus and Deshawn were teaching her a different kind of trust, one based on character and consistency rather than contracts and incentives. It was harder than any business challenge she'd ever faced, and it mattered more than any deal she'd ever closed. Tomorrow they'd start building actual houses. The planning phase was over. Now came the real test of whether their partnership could survive contact with reality. 3 weeks after Victoria had sat in the rain losing everything, she stood on a vacant lot, watching Marcus stake out the foundation for their first house. The Lawsons would build here, a small efficient home designed with Dorothy's artistic touches and James's practical carpentry experience. 50 feet away, Thomas Bennett's lot was similarly marked. The young veteran had spent hours with Marcus developing a design that felt secure, lots of windows so he could see approaches from all directions, a layout that avoided blind corners. His military training had left him hyper-vigilant, and the design needed to accommodate that rather than fight it. "This is really happening," Victoria said, still somewhat amazed. "Getting permits was the easy part," Marcus said, not looking up from his work. "Now comes the hard part. Actually building something while keeping everyone safe and trained." They had 8 volunteers, ranging in age from 19 to 56. Marcus had spent the previous week teaching basic safety protocols and tool use. Now it was time to put theory into practice. Victoria watched as Marcus gathered everyone for the first day of actual construction. He was a natural teacher, patient, clear, and respectful of people's different learning speeds. He started with the absolute basics: how to safely use a hammer, how to measure and mark cuts, how to work as a team. "Construction isn't about individual skill," Marcus explained. "It's about coordination. Everyone has to communicate, watch out for each other, and be willing to ask for help. Pride gets people hurt." The first day was slow. They managed to excavate and prepare the foundation sites for both houses, but it took twice as long as Marcus had estimated. Victoria kept wanting to intervene, to suggest more efficient approaches, but she'd learned to hold back and let Marcus teach at the pace people needed. By the end of the day, everyone was exhausted but energized. They'd actually started building homes for people who needed them. "How'd it feel?" Marcus asked Victoria as they walked back to the warehouse. "Slow," Victoria admitted. "But good. I kept wanting to push people to work faster, but I understood why you didn't." "Because we're not trying to build houses fast," Marcus said. "We're trying to build them right while teaching people skills they'll use for the rest of their lives. Fast comes with experience." The second day brought their first real challenge. One of the volunteers, a young man named Carlos, got frustrated with the slow pace and tried to rush a measurement. He cut a piece of lumber wrong, wasting material they couldn't afford to replace. Marcus didn't get angry. Instead, he gathered everyone around the mistake. "This is going to happen," he said. "We're all learning. Mistakes are part of learning, but this is a good reminder that in construction, rushing causes more delays than going slow. Carlos, help me figure out how we can salvage this piece for a different use." Victoria was impressed by how Marcus turned the mistake into a teaching moment without shaming Carlos. In her corporate life, mistakes had been failures to be minimized and blamed. Marcus treated them as inevitable parts of the learning process. But on the third day, a mistake happened that couldn't be turned into a simple lesson. Dorothy Lawson was helping carry a heavy beam when she slipped on loose gravel. She fell hard, the beam coming down across her arm. The crack was audible, everything stopped. Marcus immediately took charge, sending someone to call emergency services while he carefully assessed Dorothy's injury. James was beside his wife, his face white with fear. "It's broken," Marcus said quietly. "We need to get you to the hospital." "We can't afford a hospital," Dorothy said through gritted teeth, tears streaming down her face. "We have insurance," Victoria interjected. "The liability policy we got covers medical expenses for participants." But as they waited for the ambulance, Victoria saw the fear in everyone's faces. This could have been worse, someone could have been killed. After Dorothy was taken to the hospital, Marcus called everyone together. "This is my fault," he said, his voice heavy. "I should have seen that the gravel made that area unstable. I should have required better safety equipment. I got overconfident because things were going smoothly." "It was an accident," James said quietly. "Dorothy doesn't blame you, and neither do I. That doesn't change the fact that she got hurt on my watch," Marcus said. "We're suspending construction until I can review all our safety protocols and make sure we're not cutting corners anywhere else." Victoria wanted to argue that one accident shouldn't derail everything, but she saw the pain in Marcus's face and understood. This wasn't just about safety protocols, it was about Marcus feeling responsible for someone getting hurt while trusting him. That night, at the warehouse, Marcus was quiet. Deshawn stayed close to his father, clearly worried. "Dorothy's going to be okay," Victoria said. "The hospital called. It's a clean break. She'll be in a cast for 6 weeks, but she'll heal completely." 6 weeks she'll be in pain because I wasn't careful enough," Marcus said. "It was an accident," Victoria repeated what James had said. "Accidents happen because someone wasn't paying enough attention." Marcus shot back, "I was so focused on teaching and building that I didn't properly assess the safety of every workspace. That's on me." "So what now?" Victoria asked. "We quit, prove that you were right to be cautious and I was wrong to be confident." Marcus looked at her sharply. "Is that what you think this is about, proving you wrong, isn't it? You've been warning me all along about being too confident, about making promises we might not keep. Now someone's gotten hurt, and you get to be right about the dangers." "Someone got hurt, Victoria," Marcus said, his voice rising. "A woman who trusted me broke her arm because I made a mistake, and you're turning this into an argument about our partnership dynamics." Victoria realized she'd said the wrong thing, had made this about herself when it should be about Dorothy. "I'm sorry, that was selfish. You're right to be upset. I'm not just upset, I'm questioning whether I should be doing this at all." Marcus said, "I've been homeless for 8 months. I have an injury that ended my construction career. I have a son to take care of. What business do I have trying to teach other people how to build houses? Maybe this whole thing was arrogance on my part. Or maybe it was hope," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe it was seeing a way to use your skills to help people even though the path is risky and uncertain. Hope doesn't prevent broken bones." "No, but giving up because something went wrong doesn't help anyone either." They were at an impasse. Marcus wanted to pause everything to review safety. Victoria wanted to push forward to prove they could overcome setbacks. Neither approach was entirely right or wrong. Deshawn, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "Dad, what would Mom have said?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Your mom would have said that doing important work means accepting that things will go wrong sometimes. She would have said that the question isn't whether you make mistakes, but how you respond to them." "So what's the right response?" Deshawn asked. "I don't know, son. That's what I'm trying to figure out." Over the next 3 days, while construction was paused, Marcus conducted a comprehensive safety review. He identified 17 areas where their protocols could be improved. He researched industry standards for volunteer construction projects. He reached out to licensed contractors he knew from his previous work to ask for guidance. Victoria initially felt impatient with the delay, but as she watched Marcus work, she realized something important. His thoroughness wasn't about being overly cautious, it was about being responsible. He was taking seriously the trust that people had placed in him.
On the fourth day, Dorothy called from the hospital. "When are we starting back up?" she asked. "I've got one good arm, I can still help with planning and supervising." "You just broke your arm on our construction site," Marcus said. "You don't have to come back." "I don't have to, I want to," Dorothy insisted. "Marcus, accidents happen. This could have happened anywhere. James and I still believe in what we're building. We're not going to let one setback stop us. Are you?" The question hung in the air. Marcus looked at Victoria, then at Deshawn, then at the revised safety protocols he'd spent days developing. "No," he said finally. "We're not going to stop, but we are going to be more careful." They resumed construction the following Monday, 5 days after the accident. Everyone wore better safety equipment. Marcus had set up proper work zones with clear safety boundaries. They moved slower, but no one complained. Dorothy showed up with her arm in a cast, ready to supervise and make decisions about design details she could manage one-handed. Her attitude set the tone. This was a setback, not a failure. But Victoria noticed something troubling. Some of the volunteers had lost their enthusiasm. They were going through the motions, clearly worried about getting hurt themselves. Carlos, the young man who'd wasted lumber earlier, seemed especially nervous. After the workday ended, Victoria pulled Carlos aside. "What's wrong?" she asked, directly. "I'm not sure I should be here," Carlos admitted. "Mrs. Lawson got hurt because of an accident. I made a mistake that wasted materials. What if I make a bigger mistake that hurts someone else?" "What if you do?" Victoria asked. Carlos looked surprised by the question. "Then it would be my fault." "And then what?" "You'd apologize, we'd learn from it, and we'd keep going." "Carlos, do you think Marcus has never made a mistake? He's made thousands. The difference is he learned from them. But I don't want to hurt anyone while I'm learning. Neither does anyone. But if we only let people do things they're already perfect at, no one would ever learn anything new. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes, you will. The question is whether you'll make them while trying to do something meaningful, or whether you'll play it safe and never try." Carlos thought about this. "When you lost your company, did you feel like this? Like you weren't sure you should try again because you might fail?" Victoria was struck by the question. "I felt exactly like that. I still feel like that sometimes. But Marcus taught me that the alternative, giving up because things might go wrong, is worse than the risk of failure." Over the following weeks, construction progressed steadily. They had more small setbacks, measurements that didn't quite work, materials that arrived wrong, weather delays. But each challenge was met with problem solving, rather than panic. Victoria found herself enjoying the physical work more than she'd expected. There was something satisfying about seeing tangible progress each day, walls rising, roofs taking shape, spaces transforming from empty lots to actual homes. 2 months after breaking ground, the Lawsons' house was nearly complete. It was small, just 600 square feet, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Dorothy's design touches gave it character, and James's carpentry skill showed in every joint and corner. "This is ours," Dorothy said, walking through the nearly finished space, her arm still in a cast but healing well. "We actually built this with our own hands." Thomas's house was a week behind schedule but coming together. The veteran had thrown himself into the work with military discipline, learning skills faster than anyone else. But Victoria noticed he was struggling emotionally. Some days he was fully present, engaged and enthusiastic. Other days he seemed distant, barely speaking to anyone. "Thomas is dealing with PTSD, Marcus explained when Victoria asked about it. "Some days are harder than others. We work around it. Shouldn't he be getting treatment?" Victoria asked. "He is. He goes to the VA twice a week. But treatment doesn't make the PTSD disappear. It just gives him tools to manage it. Building this house is part of his healing process." Victoria was learning that housing wasn't just about physical shelter, it was about dignity, purpose, stability. Every person they helped had complex needs that went far beyond just having a roof over their heads. 3 months after breaking ground, they held a completion ceremony for the Lawsons' house. Pastor Green blessed the home. Community members who'd supported the project came to celebrate. James and Dorothy stood in their new living room, looking around at space they'd helped create. "We didn't just build a house," James said in a brief speech. "We built proof that we still matter." that we still have value, that we can still create something beautiful even after we lost everything. Victoria felt tears in her eyes. This was what she'd been missing in her corporate career, the direct visible impact of her work on real people's lives. Thomas's house was completed 2 weeks later. The veteran's completion ceremony was quieter. He wasn't comfortable with crowds, but equally meaningful. He stood in his new home, looking around at the safe space he'd helped build. "I can sleep here," he said quietly to Marcus and Victoria. "For the first time in 3 years, I'll be able to sleep without constantly watching for threats. You gave me peace." "You gave that to yourself," Marcus corrected gently. "We just provided the framework." As they walked back to the warehouse that evening, Victoria reflected on the past 3 months. They'd built 2 houses on minimal budget, trained 8 people in construction skills, and proven that their model could work. But they'd also faced setbacks, dealt with injuries, struggled with doubts, and learned hard lessons about limitations and trust. "So what's next?" Victoria asked Marcus. "Now we figure out if we can do this again," Marcus said. "And if we can eventually do it without me being directly involved in every detail. We need to build systems, not just houses." "That sounds like we need to formally organize as a non-profit," Victoria said. "Register with the state, set up a board of directors, develop proper operational procedures." "Which means paperwork and bureaucracy," Marcus said with a sigh. "The parts of building an organization I was hoping to avoid." "Welcome to my world," Victoria laughed. The boring but necessary parts of creating something sustainable. They had proven their concept. Now came the harder work of turning it into something that could outlast their personal involvement. But as Victoria looked at the 2 completed houses, visible proof of what they'd built together, she felt something she hadn't felt since losing her company. Pride. Real pride, in work that actually mattered to people beyond balance sheets and stock prices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they could celebrate what they'd already accomplished. The success of the first 2 houses brought attention Victoria and Marcus hadn't anticipated. A local newspaper ran a feature story about the Lawsons and Thomas, complete with photos of the completed homes, and quotes about how participatory construction had changed their lives. Within a week, they had 43 families applying for their next round. "We can't help 43 families," Marcus said, looking at the stack of applications with a mixture of pride and overwhelm. "We barely managed 2, then we need to scale up," Victoria said, her business instincts kicking in. "Recruit more volunteers, find more materials, build more houses simultaneously." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that worries me," Marcus said. "We succeeded with 2 houses because we kept the scope manageable. If we try to do too much too fast, quality suffers." They were sitting in the warehouse, applications spread across the makeshift table. Deshawn was at the library doing homework, giving them space to have difficult conversations. "What if we compromise?" Victoria suggested. "We take on 4 houses this round instead of 2. Still manageable, but double our impact." Marcus shook his head. "It's not just about numbers. Every family we work with requires personal attention, training, problem solving. I can't personally oversee 4 construction sites while maintaining the quality we achieved with 2.
"Then we hire help," Victoria said. "We've been operating on no budget, but the newspaper article has brought in donations. We have almost $8,000 now. We could hire an assistant for you, someone with construction experience who can help supervise sites." Marcus asked skeptically. "Where do we find someone with construction skills and teaching ability who's willing to work for minimal pay with a homeless guy as their boss?" "What about Thomas?" Victoria said suddenly. "He learned faster than anyone else. He has leadership experience from the military. He's looking for work." Marcus considered this. Thomas is dealing with PTSD. Asking him to take on leadership responsibility might be too much. Or it might be exactly what he needs: purpose and responsibility. Victoria countered. "At least ask him." They met with Thomas the next day. The veteran listened carefully to their proposal: help Marcus oversee construction sites, assist with training volunteers, act as a bridge between their growing organization and the people they served. "I'll do it," Thomas said immediately, "but I need to be honest about something. I have bad days. Days when the PTSD makes it hard to function. If I take this job, you need to understand there'll be times I can't show up. We understand, Marcus said, and we can work around that. What we need is someone who gets what we're trying to build and can help maintain quality as we grow. I get it, Thomas said. You two gave me my life back. I want to help do that for other people. With Thomas on board, they selected 4 families for their next round, all carefully chosen based on readiness to fully participate. But before they could begin, Victoria insisted they needed to formalize their organization. We can't keep operating out of a warehouse using Marcus's personal connections for everything, she argued. We need to be a legal entity with proper structure. Which means what exactly? Marcus asked. It means filing paperwork to become a registered nonprofit, creating a board of directors, opening a bank account, setting up bookkeeping systems, all the administrative infrastructure that makes us legitimate. Marcus looked pained. That sounds like weeks of work that doesn't build any houses. It's weeks of work that protects us legally and makes us eligible for real funding, Victoria corrected. We can't grow sustainably without it. They spent the next 2 weeks navigating bureaucracy. Victoria handled most of the paperwork, drawing on her business experience, but she made sure Marcus was involved in every decision. They recruited a 5-person board of directors that included Pastor Green, Mrs. Patterson from the library, a local architect who'd volunteered on their first project, and 2 community members who'd experienced housing insecurity themselves. I want to formally name our organization, Victoria said during one of these planning sessions. We've been calling it the Housing Projects or Marcus's program, but we need an actual name. What do you suggest? Marcus asked. I was thinking Building Dignity, Victoria said, because that's what we're really doing. Not just constructing houses but building people's sense of dignity and self-worth. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Angela would have liked that. She always said everyone deserves to be treated with dignity no matter their circumstances. Then Building Dignity it is. The administrative work was tedious but necessary. Victoria created budgets and timelines. Marcus developed training curriculum and safety protocols. Together they wrote a mission statement that captured their vision. Building Dignity empowers individuals and families experiencing housing insecurity to construct their own homes while learning marketable skills, creating sustainable pathways from crisis to stability. But as they prepared to launch their second round of construction, trouble arrived from an unexpected direction. Victoria received a phone call from someone she'd hoped never to hear from again, her ex-husband, Richard Henderson. Victoria, I heard about your little housing project. Richard's voice was smooth, condescending. Very impressive reinvention. I'd like to discuss a potential investment opportunity. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. Richard, I'm not interested in anything you're proposing. Don't be hasty. Henderson Capital has been following your progress. We're interested in providing significant funding for expansion. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could help 10 times as many people. In exchange for what? Standard investor terms. Board representation, quarterly reporting, strategic input on growth decisions. Nothing unreasonable. Everything about the offer felt wrong. Victoria knew Richard never did anything that didn't primarily benefit Richard. I need to discuss this with my partner, she said finally. Of course, but Victoria, don't let pride make you turn down an opportunity to help more people. That would be rather selfish, don't you think? After hanging up, Victoria sat in troubled silence. Marcus found her 20 minutes later still staring at her borrowed phone. What's wrong? He asked immediately. She explained Richard's call and offer. Marcus listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. What do you think? She asked, when she finished. I think your ex-husband doesn't do anything out of charity. Marcus said bluntly. Why would he want to invest in our organization after you told me he tried to destroy you during the divorce? Exactly. But what if he's genuine? What if we turn down funding that could help dozens of families because of my personal history with him? Can he actually win control if we take his money? If we're not careful about the terms, yes, he could end up with board majority, which means he controls major decisions. They spent the evening analyzing Richard's proposal, which arrived via email within an hour of their call. It was dressed up in philanthropic language, but the reality was clear. Richard wanted control and the tax benefits of appearing charitable. He wants board majority, Marcus noted, reading through the terms. That means he controls major decisions. And look at the growth requirements. doubling our participants every quarter. That's impossible without sacrificing quality, so we decline, Marcus said simply, but hundreds of thousands of dollars that comes with strings that would destroy what we're building. Marcus interrupted, Victoria, we didn't create building dignity to become rich or famous or to maximize numbers. We created it to help people with dignity. Your ex-husband's money would compromise that mission. Victoria knew he was right, but turning down that much money felt painful when they had dozens of families on their waiting list. They sent a polite but firm rejection to Richard's attorney. His response came 2 days later, not an email but a surprise visit to their construction site. Victoria, don't be stubborn about this, Richard said, showing up unannounced while they were training volunteers. Think about the people you could help with proper funding and infrastructure. Marcus stepped forward before Victoria could respond. Mr. Henderson, I'm Marcus Thompson, Victoria's partner. We appreciate your interest, but we're not looking for investors who want to control our operations. Richard's eyes swept over Marcus with barely concealed disdain. You must be the formerly homeless gentleman with the construction background. Impressive work you've done here. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but Victoria saw his jaw tighten. We've made our decision, Victoria said firmly. Please respect that and leave. I'm trying to help you, Richard said, his tone hardening. But if you insist on running this organization into the ground because of misplaced pride, don't come crying to me when you fail. After Richard left, the volunteers stood in uncomfortable silence. Victoria felt humiliated and angry. Angry at Richard for his condescension, angry at herself for ever being married to someone so arrogant. Everyone take a break, Marcus said calmly, then pulled Victoria aside. Are you okay? I'm furious, Victoria admitted. The way he looked at you, the way he dismissed what we're building. He's trying to provoke a reaction, Marcus said. Don't give him the satisfaction. We made the right decision, but over the following days strange things began to happen. A delivery of lumber they'd ordered never arrived, with the supplier claiming their account had been flagged for non-payment, even though they'd paid in full. The city inspector who'd approved their permits showed up for an unexpected routine inspection, and found minor violations that required correction. A critical volunteer suddenly quit, claiming he'd received a better job offer. This isn't coincidence, Victoria said after the third incident. Richard is sabotaging us. Can we prove it? Marcus asked. No, he's too smart to leave evidence. Everything looks like normal business problems or bad luck. The sabotage was subtle but effective. Each incident cost them time and money they couldn't afford to waste. Their 4-house project fell behind schedule. Volunteers became frustrated and demoralized. Then came the incident that nearly broke them. They arrived at their construction site one morning to find it vandalized. Tools were stolen, materials destroyed, and spray painted across the partially built structures was a message. Scam artist Victoria Henderson taking advantage of homeless people. One of their families, Jennifer Moore, a single mother with 3 children, stood looking at the destruction, tears streaming down her face. Someone doesn't want us to succeed. Marcus examined the scene carefully. This wasn't random vandalism. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They destroyed the most expensive materials and took the tools that would be hardest to replace. Richard, Victoria said quietly. This has to be Richard. Can you prove it? No, he'd be too smart to do it himself. Thomas, who'd been surveying the damage, surprised them all by taking charge. Listen up, I've dealt with worse than this in deployment. We don't have time to feel sorry for ourselves. We need to salvage what we can, report this to the police, and figure out how to keep building. His military discipline galvanized the group. They spent the day documenting the damage, filing reports and assessing what could be saved. But the emotional impact was devastating. Some volunteers quit on the spot, afraid of being associated with something that attracted this kind of attention. The families they were helping felt targeted and vulnerable. That evening, Victoria and Marcus sat in the warehouse, Deshawn already asleep in his corner. We can't sustain this, Victoria said quietly. The constant attacks, the sabotage, the harassment. Richard won't stop as long as I'm involved. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I should step back. Maybe building dignity would be better off without me bringing Richard's vindictiveness down on everyone. Marcus stared at her. You want to quit? I want to do what's best for the people we serve, and right now my presence is putting them in danger. That's Richard talking, not you. Marcus said. He's trying to drive you away by making you feel like you're the problem. Don't fall for it. But people are getting hurt, because Richard is a vindictive person with too much money and power. Marcus interrupted. That's on him, not you. If you leave, he wins. He proves that wealthy people can destroy anything good that threatens their worldview. So what do? Just endure his attacks and hope he gets bored. We document everything. Marcus said. We keep building despite the obstacles. We trust that good work eventually speaks louder than sabotage. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. The community responded to the vandalism with overwhelming support. Giovanni from the restaurant organized a fundraiser that brought in $3,000. Mrs. Patterson started a tool drive that replaced everything stolen. Volunteers who'd quit came back, bringing friends. People see what you're building, Pastor Green told them. They recognize authentic good work and they want to protect it. The 4 houses were completed eventually, though weeks behind schedule. Each family who moved in represented a small victory against Richard's attempts at sabotage. But Victoria knew this wasn't over. Richard had tried overt sabotage and failed. His next approach would be more subtle and potentially more dangerous. She just didn't know what form it would take. Several months after completing their second round of houses, Building Dignity had achieved something resembling stability. They had a small office, a donated space in the church basement, steady volunteer participation, and a waiting list of families they were slowly working through. Thomas had become invaluable, his leadership helping Marcus manage multiple construction sites. But the growth was taking a toll that Victoria hadn't anticipated. Marcus was exhausted. He spent 12-hour days on construction sites, then came home to work on training curriculum and volunteer management. Deshawn, now 10 years old, was being raised by a father who was always either working or thinking about work. Dad, can we do something this weekend? Deshawn asked one evening. Just us, not Building Dignity stuff. Marcus looked up from the budget spreadsheet he was reviewing with Victoria. I wish I could, son, but we have that site inspection Saturday morning, and Sunday I need to meet with the new volunteers. You always have Building Dignity stuff, Deshawn said, his voice small. The hurt in the boy's voice struck Victoria like a physical blow. They'd been so focused on helping other families that they'd forgotten Marcus had his own family to care for. Deshawn's right, Victoria said. You need to take a break, Marcus. You're burning out. I can't take a break when we have families depending on us. Marcus protested. You'll be no use to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion, Victoria argued. Thomas can handle the site inspection. I can meet with volunteers. You need to spend time with your son. Marcus looked torn between his responsibilities to Building Dignity and his responsibilities to Deshawn. Finally he nodded. You're right, I've been neglecting him. That Saturday Marcus and Deshawn went to the park together, just the two of them. No work talk allowed. When they returned that evening, Deshawn was laughing for the first time in weeks, and Marcus looked more relaxed than Victoria had seen him in months. We needed that, Marcus admitted. I've been so focused on everyone else's families that I forgot to take care of my own. But the pattern of overwork resumed quickly. Building Dignity's success meant more demand, more families applying, more pressure to help everyone. And Marcus couldn't say no to people who needed help. The tension came to a head during a board meeting. They were discussing whether to expand to a second neighborhood, which would require hiring additional staff and significantly increasing their budget. We have the demand, Victoria argued. We have over 60 families on our waiting list. We're turning away people who need help. We also have limited capacity, Pastor Green countered. Marcus is already stretched too thin. If we expand before we have proper infrastructure, quality will suffer. Then we hire more staff, Victoria said. We have enough donations to bring on another construction supervisor and a part-time administrator. Who? Marcus asked tiredly. Where do we find people with the right skills and mindset who'll work for minimal pay? We train them, Victoria said. The same way we train our participants. We find people with potential and teach them what they need to know. That takes time we don't have, Marcus said, his frustration showing. Every day we spend training staff is a day we're not building houses. They were at an impasse. Victoria wanted to grow to help more people. Marcus wanted to maintain quality and protect his own well-being. The board couldn't decide which approach was right. After the meeting, Mrs. Patterson pulled Victoria aside.
"You're pushing too hard," she said gently. "I've seen Marcus's face during these discussions. He's drowning, but he won't say no because he cares too much about helping people. What am I supposed to do? Tell families we can't help them even though we could if we expanded? I'm suggesting you consider that helping fewer people well might be better than helping many people poorly," Mrs. Patterson said, "and I'm suggesting you notice that your partnership with Marcus is becoming unbalanced. You're driving growth, he's trying to maintain quality, and neither of you is truly listening to the other anymore." The observation stung because it was true. Victoria and Marcus had developed a pattern where she pushed for expansion, and he resisted, and their conversations had become negotiations rather than collaborations. That night, Victoria tried to talk to Marcus about it, but he was exhausted and defensive. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said. "You handle paperwork and fundraising. I'm the one on the sites every day, responsible for people's safety, teaching skills, solving problems. If something goes wrong, it's on me. That's not fair," Victoria protested. "I work just as hard as you do. Doing different work," Marcus said, "work that doesn't carry the same physical and emotional weight. So my contribution is less valuable." "I didn't say that, you implied it," Victoria interrupted. "I've been working 80-hour weeks managing all the administrative and fundraising work that you don't want to do. Don't minimize that because it's not physical labor." They were both too tired and stressed for a productive conversation. The argument ended with both feeling misunderstood and resentful. The strain in their partnership affected everything. Volunteers noticed the tension. Board members became concerned. Even Deshawn picked up on it. "Are you and Dad going to stop working together?" the boy asked Victoria one afternoon when Marcus was at a construction site. "Why would you think that?" "Because you argue a lot now. And Dad seems sad even when good things happen." Victoria didn't know how to answer. She and Marcus weren't arguing constantly, but the easy collaboration of their early days had been replaced by something more strained. The breaking point came during an incident on a construction site. One of their participants, a woman named Angela Porter, made a significant measurement error that resulted in wasted materials. It was the kind of mistake that happens when people are learning, but it came at a bad time. They were already over budget and behind schedule on that particular house. Marcus lost his temper, not screaming or being abusive but speaking harshly in a way Victoria had never heard from him. "How could you be so careless? We went over measurements 3 times. This is expensive lumber we can't afford to replace." Angela was crushed. She apologized repeatedly, nearly in tears. Thomas pulled Marcus aside while Victoria stayed with Angela. "You need to take a break," Thomas said bluntly. "You're burning out and it's affecting your judgment. That woman made an honest mistake, and you treated her like she'd done something malicious." "We can't afford mistakes right now," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We can't afford to have you collapse either," Thomas countered. "You've been working 7 days a week for months. You're exhausted, you're stressed, and it's showing." After the incident, Marcus apologized to Angela, who graciously accepted. But the damage was done. Marcus had shown that even his patience had limits, and it scared him. "I became the kind of boss I always hated," he told Victoria that evening. "The kind who takes their stress out on people who are just trying their best." "You're human," Victoria said. "You made a mistake because you're exhausted. That's not an excuse. Angela trusted me to teach her and I shamed her for learning." "So what do we do?" Victoria asked. "You need a break, but we have commitments to families who are counting on us." "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I honestly don't know." They sat in silence for a long moment, both feeling the weight of what they'd built and the cost it was exacting. "Maybe we need to scale back," Victoria said finally. "Finish our current projects, then take a month off before starting new ones." "We can't afford a month off," Marcus said. "We have bills to pay, staff salaries to cover." "We can't afford for you to burn out either," Victoria countered. "Marcus, you're not okay. I can see it. Deshawn can see it. If you don't take care of yourself, everything we've built will collapse." Marcus knew she was right, but accepting it meant acknowledging that he had limits, something his pride struggled with. The decision was made for them when Marcus collapsed at a construction site 3 days later. He'd been working in the heat without properly hydrating, and his body simply gave out. Fortunately, Thomas was there and got him to the hospital quickly, but the incident terrified everyone, especially Deshawn. "Is Dad going to die?" the boy asked Victoria at the hospital, his eyes wide with fear. "No, honey, he's just exhausted and dehydrated. The doctors are taking care of him, but what if he does die? Then I'll have no one." Victoria pulled Deshawn close, struck by how much responsibility this child had been carrying. "Your dad is going to be fine, and even if something happened, which it won't, you'd still have people who care about you." When Marcus woke up, the doctor was blunt. "You're experiencing exhaustion, dehydration, and signs of chronic stress. If you don't make significant lifestyle changes, you're heading for a serious breakdown." "I can't stop working," Marcus protested weakly. "You don't have to stop working," the doctor said, "but you need to work reasonable hours, take days off, and prioritize your health. Otherwise you won't be able to help anyone because you'll be too sick to function." The collapse forced a reckoning. The board held an emergency meeting and made decisions without waiting for Marcus's input. They were putting all new construction projects on hold for 1 month. Thomas would supervise completion of current houses. Marcus was required to take 2 weeks of complete rest, then return to a reduced schedule. "We're not asking," Pastor Green said when Marcus tried to protest. "We're telling you, if you don't take care of yourself, you're no good to building dignity or your son." Victoria felt guilty. She'd been pushing for growth, not fully recognizing how much of that burden fell on Marcus. She'd been so focused on helping more people that she'd contributed to Marcus's burnout. "I'm sorry," she told him when they were alone. "I pushed too hard for expansion without seeing what it was costing you."
"I should have been honest about my limits," Marcus said. "I thought I could handle everything. I was wrong." During Marcus's forced rest, Victoria ran Building Dignity's operations. It was eye-opening. She'd known intellectually that Marcus carried a heavy load, but experiencing it firsthand showed her just how much he'd been managing. The constant problem-solving, the emotional labor of supporting participants, the physical demands of construction work, it was overwhelming. "I don't know how you did this for months," she told Marcus during his second week of rest. "Stubbornness and denial," Marcus said wryly. "Neither of which are sustainable strategies." They used the forced pause to have honest conversations about Building Dignity's future. What did they want the organization to become? What were they personally willing and able to contribute? What were their actual limits? "I can't be on construction sites 12 hours a day anymore," Marcus admitted. "My body can't take it, and Deshawn needs a father who's present. And I can't keep pushing for growth without considering the human cost," Victoria said. "I got so focused on maximizing impact that I lost sight of sustainable pace." They decided on a new approach. Building Dignity would help 4 families at a time, no more, no less. They'd complete those projects well before starting new ones. Marcus would work 40 hours a week maximum, with weekends reserved for Deshawn. They'd hire additional staff before expanding rather than expanding and hoping to manage. It meant helping fewer people overall but helping them better. It meant prioritizing quality and sustainability over quantity and growth. When Marcus returned to work after his 2 weeks of rest, he looked different, more rested, but also more certain about his boundaries. "I'm not going to apologize for working reasonable hours anymore," he told the board. "Building dignity is important, but it's not worth destroying my health or my relationship with my son." The board supported him completely. They'd been worried about his burnout for months and were relieved he was finally acknowledging his limits, but the slower pace meant tougher decisions. They had to turn away families who desperately needed help. They had to tell people on their waiting list that it would be months before they could be served. It was painful, but it was honest. "We're building something sustainable," Victoria reminded herself when the guilt became overwhelming. "That matters more than trying to help everyone immediately and failing." The crisis had revealed cracks in their foundation, both organizational and personal, but by addressing those cracks honestly, they were building something stronger. Several months after Marcus's health crisis, Building Dignity had found a more sustainable rhythm. They were helping families at a manageable pace, Marcus was maintaining better boundaries, and their organizational structure was more stable. They'd even moved out of the warehouse into a small apartment above their office, a significant step toward normal life for Marcus and Deshawn. Then Thomas Bennett came to Victoria with news that would test everything they'd built. "I need to tell you something," Thomas said. his voice heavy. Something I should have told you months ago. They met at a coffee shop away from the office. Thomas looked like he hadn't slept in days. About 6 months ago a man approached me, Thomas began. Said he represented someone interested in building dignity. He offered me $5,000 to encourage you to partner with a specific developer named Gerald Hutchins. Victoria felt her stomach drop. Richard, I didn't know that at first, Thomas said quickly. The man never mentioned Richard Henderson by name. He just said there was a development company that wanted to work with building dignity and that some key people needed encouragement to see the opportunity. So you took the money. I took the money, Thomas admitted, shame evident in his voice. My daughter from before I was homeless, she needed medical care I couldn't afford. They knew that. They exploited it. How much have you done for them? Victoria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I pushed for the Hutchins partnership twice in board meetings. I talked to other volunteers about how we were growing too slowly. He paused, struggling with the confession. I suggested at one point that maybe your caution was holding Marcus back. You tried to create division between me and Marcus. Yes, and I'm sorry. I told myself it was for a good cause, that the partnership really would help more people. But the truth is, I sold you out for $5,000 because I was desperate. Victoria sat in silence, processing this. Thomas, reliable, dedicated Thomas who'd become integral to their work, had been paid to sabotage them from within. Does Marcus know? She asked finally. Not yet. I wanted to tell you first because, Thomas paused, because I'm pretty sure once Marcus finds out he'll fire me. And he'll be right to. But I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from anyone else. Why are you telling me this now? Because they contacted me again last week, offered more money to keep pushing the Hutchins partnership and to undermine your leadership. And I realized I can't keep doing this. I'd rather lose my job and my housing than keep betraying people who gave me a chance when no one else would. Victoria felt a complicated mix of anger, betrayal, and reluctant respect. Thomas had been manipulated, had made terrible choices, but was now coming clean knowing it would cost him everything. We need to tell Marcus, she said. Today, Marcus's reaction was worse than Victoria had feared. Not anger, that would have been easier. Instead he looked devastated, as if something fundamental about his worldview had been broken. You took money to sabotage us, Marcus said quietly to Thomas. After everything we did for you, after we gave you a job, trusted you with responsibility, treated you like family. I know, Thomas said. There's no excuse. I was desperate and selfish, and I convinced myself that what I was doing wasn't really that bad, because Hutchins's partnership might have actually helped people. It wouldn't have, Victoria interjected. I researched Hutchins. His company is partially owned by Richard. The whole thing was a setup to give Richard control over building dignity. Marcus looked at her. You knew about Hutchins, I suspected. I've been investigating quietly for the past month. What I didn't know was that Thomas had been paid to push the partnership. The three of them sat in heavy silence. Deshawn, who'd been doing homework in the corner, had stopped working and was watching them with worried eyes. What happens now? Thomas finally asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to fire you immediately. You betrayed our trust in the worst way possible. I understand, but another part of me recognizes that you were manipulated. Richard, or whoever's working for him, specifically exploited your desperation about your daughter. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it provides context. I don't deserve your understanding, Thomas said. No, you don't, Marcus agreed. But I'm trying to decide what the right response is, what would actually serve our mission and our values. Victoria watched Marcus struggle with the decision. She knew what her corporate instinct said. Fire Thomas immediately, cut all ties, protect the organization from further sabotage. But she also knew that building dignity was built on different principles than her previous company had been. Can we trust you going forward? Victoria asked Thomas directly. I want to say yes, Thomas said. But I broke your trust once. Why would you believe any promise I make now? Because you came forward voluntarily, Marcus said slowly, working through his thoughts out loud. You could have kept quiet, kept taking their money. Instead you chose to confess knowing it would cost you your job and housing. That doesn't undo the damage I did. No, it doesn't, Marcus agreed. But it does show that you're capable of choosing integrity over self-interest, even if it took you too long to make that choice. They talked for hours, working through the implications and possibilities. Finally, Marcus made a decision. "You're suspended for 2 weeks without pay," he said to Thomas. "During that time, you'll write a full accounting of everything you did, every conversation, every action taken on behalf of whoever paid you. You'll also write an honest explanation of why you did it and what you learned from it." "And after 2 weeks?" Thomas asked. "After 2 weeks you'll present that accounting to our board. They'll decide whether you can continue working with Building Dignity. I'm recusing myself from that decision because I'm too emotionally involved." "That's more than fair," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not just throwing me out immediately." After Thomas left, Victoria turned to Marcus. "Are you sure about this? He betrayed us." "I know, but I'm not sure firing him immediately serves our mission better than giving him a chance to make it right. If we believe in rehabilitation and second chances for our participants, shouldn't we extend that same grace to our staff, even when they actively sabotaged us?" "Especially then," Marcus said. "Otherwise our values are just words we apply selectively." The board meeting 2 weeks later was tense. Thomas presented his full accounting, a painful detailed confession of everything he'd done. He held nothing back, even things Victoria and Marcus hadn't known about. "I created doubts about Victoria's leadership," Thomas admitted. "I suggested to volunteers that she was using Building Dignity to rebuild her own reputation rather than genuinely helping people. I questioned decisions in ways designed to make Marcus and Victoria seem like they weren't truly partners. And I pushed repeatedly for partnerships that I knew would ultimately give Richard Henderson control." "Why should we give you a second chance?" asked one board member. "You shouldn't," Thomas said honestly. "I don't deserve one, but if you do choose to give me another chance, I promise I'll spend the rest of my time with Building Dignity proving that choice wasn't a mistake." The board deliberated for over an hour. Finally, they reached a decision. Thomas could stay, but with strict conditions. He'd be on probation for 6 months. He'd have no decision-making authority. He'd meet weekly with Pastor Green for accountability. And if there was any indication of further dishonesty, he'd be terminated immediately. "We're not doing this because you've earned forgiveness," Pastor Green told Thomas. "We're doing this because Building Dignity is founded on the principle that people can change when given genuine opportunities. If we don't extend that principle to our own staff, we're hypocrites." Thomas's redemption wasn't immediate or easy. Some volunteers distrusted him. Some board members remained skeptical. But slowly, through consistent honest work, he began rebuilding trust. The incident had a silver lining. It forced Victoria and Marcus to implement better safeguards against infiltration and manipulation. They created clearer policies about conflicts of interest. They developed better channels for people to report concerns. They became more vigilant about outside influences trying to shape their organization. But the biggest change was internal. Victoria and Marcus had to confront how their own communication breakdown had created space for Thomas's manipulation. If they'd been more united, more transparent with each other about concerns, the sabotage might not have been as effective. "We let our work stress damage our partnership," Victoria said during one of their processing conversations. "That created vulnerabilities that Richard exploited. So we need to protect our partnership as carefully as we protect our mission," Marcus said. They instituted weekly check-ins specifically about their working relationship, not organizational business, but how they were doing as partners. They made time to address conflicts before they festered. They practiced being honest about concerns even when honesty was uncomfortable. It was hard work, but it strengthened their foundation in ways that success alone never could have. Several months after Thomas's confession, he came to them with information about another potential threat. "Richard's attorney contacted me again," Thomas said. "Offered me $10,000 this time to provide insider information about Building Dignity's operations." "What did you tell them?" Victoria asked. "I told them no. Then I recorded the conversation and brought it to you." The recording was damning evidence of ongoing attempts to infiltrate and sabotage their organization. Victoria wanted to sue Richard immediately. "He's harassing us, trying to destroy what we've built," she argued. "We have documentation now. We can stop him legally, or we can ignore him and keep building," Marcus countered. "Every time we engage with Richard, we give him power over our attention and energy. What if we just stopped reacting? He'll keep attacking us." "Maybe, but we've built something strong enough to withstand his attacks now. We have community support, organizational stability, and a proven track record. What can he actually do to us at this point? It was a radically different approach than Victoria's instinct for direct confrontation. But Marcus had a point. Richard's power came partly from their fear of him. What if they simply refused to be afraid? They decided on a middle path. They documented everything Richard's people did, but they didn't let it dictate their actions. They built rather than fought, created rather than reacted. And slowly Richard's attempts at sabotage became less frequent. Perhaps he'd realized that building dignity was too strong and too supported to be easily destroyed. Or perhaps he'd simply gotten bored when they stopped giving him the reaction he craved. Either way, the storm of his harassment began to pass, leaving building dignity battered but intact. A year and a half after Victoria had lost everything, building dignity had housed 27 families and trained over 90 people in construction skills. The numbers were modest compared to large housing organizations, but the impact was profound. Their model of participatory construction was being studied by researchers, and other cities were reaching out to learn from their approach. But success brought a new kind of challenge, one Victoria hadn't anticipated. "We've been invited to speak at the National Housing Conference," Victoria told Marcus, showing him the email. "It's the biggest gathering of housing professionals in the country." "That sounds like an opportunity," Marcus said cautiously. "It is, but it also feels like we're being pulled away from the actual work. We're spending more time talking about what we do than actually doing it." This tension had been building for months. Media attention brought speaking invitations, consulting requests, and opportunities to influence policy. All of it was potentially valuable, but all of it took time away from building houses and training people. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "Part of me wants to seize these opportunities to spread our model, but another part of me worries that we're becoming more interested in recognition than in actual work." They decided to accept the conference invitation, but with clear boundaries. They'd speak about their model, but they wouldn't become full-time advocates or consultants. Building Dignity's primary mission was still directly helping families, not becoming thought leaders. The conference was both inspiring and troubling. They met dozens of housing professionals doing important work, but they also encountered the kind of performance they'd hoped to avoid. One developer approached them after their presentation. "Your model is brilliant marketing," he said approvingly. "The participatory element really resonates with donors. We're thinking about incorporating similar language into our materials." "It's not marketing," Marcus said sharply. "It's our actual methodology." Of course, the developer said smoothly. "But you have to admit, it's also great for fundraising appeals." After the developer walked away, Victoria turned to Marcus. "He completely missed the point. He thinks participation is a branding strategy, not a fundamental principle." "That's going to keep happening," Marcus said. "People will copy the surface elements of what we do without understanding the deeper purpose." They returned from the conference energized by some conversations, but also more certain about their own identity. Building Dignity wasn't trying to become a national brand. They were trying to prove that a different approach was possible, and to support others who wanted to implement similar models. But the attention brought a complication they hadn't foreseen. Deshaun, now 11 years old, was struggling with his father's increased public profile. "Kids at school are weird about it," Deshaun told Victoria one afternoon, when Marcus was at a construction site. "They saw Dad in that magazine article. Now some of them treat me different." "Different how?" "Some of them are nicer to me because they think my dad is famous. Others make fun of me, say my dad is just a homeless guy pretending to be important." Victoria felt protective anger rise in her chest. "What do you say when they make fun?" "I tell them my dad helps people build homes, that he's teaching people skills, that he's doing important work." Deshaun paused. "But sometimes I just want him to be my dad, not the guy everyone knows about." Victoria shared this conversation with Marcus that evening. He looked stricken. "I never thought about how this would affect Deshaun," he said. "I was so focused on our mission that I didn't consider how public attention would impact him." "He's proud of you," Victoria said. "But he also needs you to just be his father sometimes, not Building Dignity's founder." Marcus made immediate changes. He turned down most media requests. He stopped bringing work home as often.
He created more space for Deshawn to just be a kid with a dad, not the son of someone doing important work. But the adjustment revealed another challenge. Marcus had been defining himself through building dignity for so long that he'd partially lost his identity as just a person. When he tried to separate his work from his self, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. "I've been a homeless father, then a founder of an organization," he told Victoria. "I don't know how to be just Marcus anymore." "Then maybe it's time to figure that out," Victoria said gently. They both needed to rediscover identities beyond their work. Victoria suggested they take actual time off, not working from home but genuinely disconnecting. "We haven't taken a real break in over a year," she pointed out. "We're so worried about the organization surviving without us that we never test whether it actually can." They decided to take 1 week completely off. Thomas would manage construction sites. Their board chair would handle any administrative emergencies. Marcus and Deshawn would go camping, something they'd talked about for years but never prioritized. "What will you do?" Marcus asked Victoria. "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't had a week with no obligations in decades." The first 2 days off were excruciating. Victoria kept checking her email, worrying about decisions being made without her input. Marcus called Thomas 3 times to check on construction progress. They were both terrible at disconnecting. But by the 3rd day something shifted. Victoria started reading books for pleasure instead of professional development. She took long walks without destination. She rediscovered the art of doing nothing productive. Marcus and Deshawn had similar experiences while camping. Away from work pressures, they just enjoyed being father and son. They fished, hiked, told stories around the campfire. "This is nice," Deshawn said on their last night camping. "You're more like you used to be." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Before building dignity you used to laugh more. You used to be silly sometimes. Lately you're always serious and worried." The observation hit Marcus hard. He'd become so consumed by responsibility that he'd forgotten how to be joyful. When they returned from their breaks, both Victoria and Marcus felt different, more grounded, more certain about what actually mattered. "We've been measuring success by growth and impact," Victoria said during their first planning meeting back. "But maybe we need to redefine what success means." "What would that look like?" Marcus asked. "Success is helping families well, not just helping many families. Success is maintaining our own health and relationships while doing this work. Success is building dignity, being sustainable without consuming our entire identities." They implemented new policies based on this reframing. They'd help 4 families at a time, no more. They'd both take 1 full day off per week, no exceptions. They'd evaluate their work based on participant outcomes and satisfaction, not on how many people they served, or how much media attention they received. The changes meant turning away opportunities. They declined a major foundation grant that would have required rapid expansion. They said no to a documentary crew that wanted to film them for 6 months. They turned down consulting contracts that would have been lucrative but time-consuming. Some board members questioned these decisions. "We could help so many more people if we took that foundation money," one argued. "Or we could maintain quality and sustainability," Victoria countered. "We've already seen what happens when we prioritize growth over capacity." Marcus ended up in the hospital. "We're not making that mistake again." The slower pace meant difficult conversations with families on their waiting list. Each time Victoria had to tell someone they couldn't help them yet, it hurt. But it also meant deeper relationships with the families they did serve, more time for training, better support for participants, stronger community connections. One evening while reviewing applications for their next cohort, Marcus said something that surprised Victoria. "I think I want to step back from day-to-day construction supervision." "What do you mean?" "I mean I want Thomas to take over as primary construction supervisor. I'll still be involved in training and oversight, but I don't need to be on sites every single day anymore." "Is this about your health, or about Deshawn?" "Both, but it's also about building dignity, outgrowing my personal involvement. If I'm the only one who can supervise construction, we can never scale sustainably. Thomas has proven himself over the past year. He's ready for more responsibility."
"Then what will you do with the time?"
"Spend more of it with Deshawn." develop better training curriculum, maybe finally finish my GED, which Angela always wanted me to do. Marcus paused, and maybe just be a person, not just a founder. Victoria understood completely. She'd been feeling similar tensions about her own role. I think I want to bring in an executive director, she said. Someone who can handle day-to-day operations while we both step into more strategic advisory roles. Can we afford that? We're going to have to if we want Building Dignity to outlast our personal involvement. The organization needs to be bigger than us. They spent the next several months deliberately building leadership capacity throughout Building Dignity. They hired an experienced nonprofit administrator named Lisa Washington as executive director. They promoted Thomas to construction director. They developed detailed documentation of all their processes and practices. It was uncomfortable relinquishing control. Victoria and Marcus had built Building Dignity from nothing, and letting others make decisions felt like losing something important. But it was also freeing. For the first time since that rainy night, they had space to breathe, to think, to be people instead of just founders. We're not abandoning the work, Marcus said during one of their processing conversations. We're evolving our relationship to it. From doing everything ourselves to enabling others to do it, Victoria agreed. Which might be more sustainable in the long run. As they stepped back from daily operations, something unexpected happened. Building Dignity thrived. Lisa brought professional management skills they'd lacked. Thomas brought construction expertise and hard-won wisdom. The organization became less dependent on any single person, and more resilient as a result. 2 years after losing everything, Victoria stood with Marcus at a celebration marking Building Dignity's 50th house completion. They'd helped 50 families build their own homes, trained over 200 people in construction skills, and inspired a dozen other communities to start similar programs. The numbers were impressive but not overwhelming. Building Dignity wasn't the largest housing organization or the fastest growing, but it was sustainable, effective, and true to its mission. We did this, Marcus said quietly, looking at the crowd of families, volunteers, and supporters. We started it, Victoria corrected. They're doing it now. We just created the framework. It was a subtle but important distinction. Success wasn't about being indispensable. It was about creating something that could thrive without constant intervention. As the celebration continued, Deshaun ran up to them, excited about something he'd learned from one of the participants. He was just a kid again, not weighed down by his father's work, and that felt like its own kind of success. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing the same truth. They'd built something more valuable than a housing program. They'd built a sustainable model for helping people with dignity, and they'd done it while learning to live balanced lives themselves. That was real wealth, and it was worth more than $12 billion could ever have bought.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.